The business world absolutely runs on research. We like to think that these huge corporate strategies, the ones that cost millions and can shape entire industries, are built on a solid foundation of science. But what if that foundation is cracked? Today, we're digging into a really fascinating review that pulls back the curtain on the science of strategy and, well, what it found might just change how you think about business expertise forever.
So let's just make this personal for a second. Is the strategy you're working on right now, the one you really believe in, is it possibly based on flawed science? It's a tough question, right? But it's one we absolutely have to ask, because this analysis shows that a huge chunk of the studies that influence business practices, they might be getting the fundamentals completely wrong.
And this is not some small, nitpicky issue. A deep dive into studies trying to explain how one thing leads to another found, on average, 3.5 critical flaws in every single paper. Let me just repeat that. Out of 62 articles reviewed in top-tier journals, not a single one was problem-free. That number is just staggering, and it points to a systemic problem in how we even create business knowledge. So, here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with the scale of the problem. Then, we'll get clear on moderation versus mediation. After that, we'll look at the common mistakes in each. And finally, talk about how we can build much, much better theories for the future. Okay, so let's be crystal clear about the scale of this. We're talking about a decade's worth of research in the most prestigious journals in the entire field. Across hundreds of studies, what researchers found is that these methodological errors, they aren't the exception, they're the norm. This isn't about a few bad papers. It's about the standard, everyday practices we use to build our understanding of the business world. So to really understand why these mistakes keep happening, we first need to get clear on two foundational ideas that are just everywhere in modern research: moderation and mediation. I promise you, getting the difference between these two right is the key that unlocks this entire topic. First up, we have moderation. A moderator tells you when a relationship exists, or maybe for whom it's strongest. Does a new marketing campaign work better with younger folks or older ones? Does a flexible work policy boost productivity more in creative teams or operational teams? It's really the core idea in business that the right answer almost always depends on the situation. The absolute best analogy for moderation is a dimmer switch. Just think of your strategy's effect on performance as a light bulb. Well, the moderator is that switch. It doesn't turn the light on or off, but it changes its intensity. It makes the effect stronger or weaker depending on the context. Now let's look at mediation. A mediator is a totally different beast. It doesn't change the strength of a relationship, it explains it. A mediator variable is all about answering the question of how or why one thing leads to another. It's the step-by-step process, the mechanism, that transmits the effect from the cause to the outcome. And the perfect picture in your head here is a chain of dominoes. If X is the first domino and Y is the very last one, the mediator, M, is that domino right in the middle. See, X doesn't directly hit Y. Nope. X hits M, and then M turns around and hits Y. The mediator is that crucial link in the causal chain that carries the effect forward. So when it all boils down, it's this. Moderation is the dimmer switch that asks when an effect happens. Mediation is the domino chain that asks how it happens. One changes the strength of a relationship, the other explains the process behind it. Got it? Cool. All right, now that we've got our foundations locked in, we can start diagnosing the problems. And we're going to begin with what the source calls the 7 sins of moderation. These are the most common errors researchers make when they try to find that dimmer switch effect. The single biggest sin by far is ignoring measurement error. Get this, over 62% of studies didn't even mention it, and here's why that's so bad. Imagine trying to multiply two numbers, but you're only kind of sure what those numbers actually are. Your final answer is going to be way less accurate than your starting points, right? Well, that's what happens here. Shaky measurements combine to create incredibly shaky conclusions, and that makes it much, much harder to see an effect that's really there. The second sin is basically using the wrong tool for the job. Most of these studies had a sample size of under 230 firms, but to find the subtle dimmer switch effects they were looking for, they often needed sample sizes of over 500. It's like trying to see bacteria with a magnifying glass instead of a microscope. The effect might be right there, but their tool just isn't powerful enough to spot it. Okay, next up is a practice with a fancy name, artificial dichotomization. But the idea is pretty simple. This is when a researcher takes a variable that has a full range of values, like firm size, and just chops it in half. They call everyone above the middle large and everyone below small. It seems easy, but you're throwing away a ton of valuable information. A company that's just barely above average gets treated exactly the same as a global mega corporation. It just doesn't make sense.
So with moderation, the common mistakes all kind of point in the same direction. They create false negatives. They cause researchers to look at the data and say, nope, nothing happening here, when they're actually missing real-world effects. The solutions are simple in theory. Use better measures, get bigger samples, and for goodness sake, stop throwing away valuable data. Okay, let's switch gears and move on to the other side of the coin, mediation. Here, the problems are just as bad, and they mostly center on this outdated but incredibly popular method for testing it, often called the causal steps approach. And before we even get to the method, just look at this. If you thought measurement error was a big problem for moderation, it is an absolute catastrophe for mediation. A jaw-dropping 88% of these studies just ignored it. And in mediation, unreliable measures are even more sinister. They don't just hide the effect, they can actively point you in the wrong direction, making you think a process works one way when the exact opposite is true. Now, about the method itself, this popular four-step procedure, it looks logical on the surface, but it has two fatal flaws. First, it demands that you find a simple link between your start and end point. But what if one domino path pushes performance up while another path pushes it down? Well, they can cancel each other out, totally hiding a powerful mediation effect that's churning away under the surface. And second, it wrongly assumes the original link has to disappear completely for mediation to be real. But in reality, most effects are only partially explained by any one pathway. So the modern solution is to just stop getting hung up on that overall link and instead focus on testing the strength of the domino chain itself. And crucially, since dominoes fall over time, we have to move away from these single snapshot studies and use research that actually measures the process as it unfolds. Okay, so we've diagnosed the problems. But the goal here isn't just to point out flaws. The real prize is using these better methods to build richer, more accurate theories about how the business world actually works. It's about moving from what's wrong to what's possible. And the path forward is to combine our two big ideas, to use the dimmer switch and the domino chain together. This lets us build theories that are much, much closer to reality, where the how, that causal process, itself changes based on the when, the specific conditions.
This allows us to ask much more powerful questions. We're no longer just asking if strategy explains the link between the environment and performance. We're asking, is that entire domino chain, from environment to strategy to performance, is that chain stronger or weaker for firms that have more resources? The resources become the dimmer switch for the entire causal pathway. See? This is how we build theories that truly reflect the complexity of the business world. The authors of the source article end with this powerful quote. The wide prevalence of all these flaws isn't just some academic issue. It represents a history of missed opportunities and, potentially wrong conclusions that have shaped business practice. Remembering these past mistakes is the only way we can avoid repeating them and really move the science of strategy forward. I know this whole discussion of methods and statistics can seem a bit abstract, but its implications are incredibly concrete. It's about the very validity of the knowledge we use to make multi-million-dollar decisions. So I'll leave you with this thought. If we finally get the science right, what hidden relationships are we going to discover? And what powerful new strategies could we unlock?